Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Founders Q&A with Anthony Millin. Next, powered by Shulman Rogers, is honored and excited to offer these open sessions the last Friday of every month at 11 a.m. The purpose is for founders to ask Anthony, who is a serial entrepreneur, venture capital partner, startup attorney, and of course, the founder of Next, powered by Shulman Rogers, to ask questions about launching, growing, scaling a company, whatever happens to be troubling you and on your mind. This is not legal. This does not constitute legal advice. This is just an open session for general information and strategy. And with that, I will turn it over to Anthony. Feel free, folks, to add your questions to the chat, or since we're such a small group, also, chime in whenever you'd like. Raise your hand, we'll call you, we'll facilitate this in a fairly easy way. So Anthony, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here with everybody today and good to see familiar faces, and hope everyone is doing well, and happy to kind of start answering questions anyone has.
Garrett, you joined us first this morning. Would you like to kick us off?
Sure, I'll throw something out there. So, Anthony, do you have any thoughts around pivoting and kind of when you maybe personally or just have come across examples of when it might make sense, or kind of just general thoughts around being nimble in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think pivoting can be very important if you feel like you've really pushed the limits of your original strategy and you still have cash in the bank, and you just feel like if you keep moving forward in the same direction that you're moving forward, you're going to kind of go through that cash but not make additional progress or reach the next level of set of milestones that are going to be important to bring in additional capital. So it's not a decision taken lightly, but you do have to constantly reassess. I mean, almost all large successful companies that you see written about, if you looked at their original vision and business plan, along the way pivoted. Sometimes it's a very small pivot, meaning same market, but just a different business model or a different approach. Sometimes it's a dramatic pivot, but we've seen companies, particularly in the COVID period of time, where those particular companies have had business models that didn't work under COVID, or maybe they were growing and then COVID kind of took them off direction and they were forced to pivot because of market conditions and changes in the market, and some of them became substantially more successful than they were before, even with the new business models that they determined. So I do think you're constantly reassessing. The other thing I would say is if you are thinking of pivoting and you have brought in some capital ahead of time, to really bring your investors along with you in that discussion. So what you want to do is early in the pivot strategy, you want to involve your investors so that they can be part of that analysis, part of that discussion, part of that assessment with you, so that in the event you decide to pivot, number one, they're with you on that and support it. And number two, they may even be prepared to put in additional capital to support the pivoting strategy. So that is kind of my view on pivoting, but it's definitely something that happens a lot.
Good considerations. Thank you.
Awesome. Anybody else? Feel free to chime in, unmute yourself, or put your questions in the chat. Don't be shy. Laura, did you have a question?
I don't really have a question, to be honest. I mean, this is a very interesting topic that because I've missed some of the other sessions with Anthony. I would say that we are not exactly pivoting per se, but we need to raise money in order to develop a proof of concept. And It's because we're so early in order to get to our seed goal. But the proof of concept, we need to raise a lot of money, like about 300,000 in order to do that. And the discussions our team has been having is to just launch a completely different type of business, a consulting business, essentially, in order to just raise that money and put it in the bank, and then use that to build a proof of concept, and then take that to into investor discussions. Is that something you've ever seen done successfully, or what do you think of that idea?
Yeah, I have seen that a few times where people kind of hit a wall on the fundraising side, and also felt like if they kept just waiting for the funding, the market might move past them.
Yeah.
And so I have seen companies that very successfully launched consulting oriented businesses just to generate cash flow, and invested that cash flow into product development. And then later either kept the consulting as a hybrid business with the product side,
Right.
or if the consulting could spin out on its own, spin it back out, or just shut, or transition once the capital is there to to more of just a product tech company. But I think that as an entrepreneur, you do what you have to do to get the capital. And I think that if you're able to, given the expertise of the founders, you're able to generate some cash flow through consulting and just invest that, I think that's fine. What I would do is I wouldn't pivot the company to be a consulting company. I would just add on some consulting services.
Right.
And again, investors later, once you have the product built, may not want to see a consulting and a services company, just because the revenue upside multiples of those different businesses are so different. But certainly to help get going, I've definitely seen that done.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. That's good to hear. Because there's someone on our team that thinks we're crazy. And I'm like, oh no, we're not that crazy.
I don't think it's crazy. And I think that you have to decide that you've kind of explored all avenues. So it always depends on what's the alternative, right? So if the alternative is setting a deadline of saying we're going to spend at least another 90 days trying to raise money, and then if we don't, we'll launch it. So have a line in the sand.
Yeah.
Where you say that, but we definitely have worked with companies who have both a consulting and a product arm.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Because that's the direction we're headed. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Great questions. Oh, Paulina, you had a question.
Yep, just to follow up on what Laura was asking. So we're building a SaaS product in the B2B space. And, we've been bootstrapping all along and doing everything we can, the 3 founders that are involved. And, as we consider raising money to grow the company once the platform is live, some pushback we had from our advisory board is they're kind of thinking that we should continue bootstrapping and get much farther along, and keep as much of the equity and control between the 3 founders, and be in a much stronger position down the lane to potentially raise money. So it's something we've been struggling with and trying to understand, because we've also heard the opposite advice, where get out, get money, it will give you the runway to grow faster. So I'm just curious what your take would be.
Yeah, my take would be that you don't need to worry as much early on if you're able to raise money about some of the additional dilution, because often what happens is by being well capitalized and being able to move your product faster to market, and to be able to be more successful in finding that original product market fit, that time has value as well, because you never know when, if you're moving too far, too long bootstrapped, you may miss bigger opportunities that were there if you could have moved faster. So my view is that if you're looking to build a very big company, the extra percentages you give up now, you'll make back later. And if the company's really successful, it's not going to matter. It's not going to make a big difference if you give up an extra 5 or 10% up front, 15%. If it gives you what you need to really take the product out through product market fit, and then from there, you can kind of raise money off of product market fit to growth. And so that is my view. Now, if you are not able to raise the capital, then you look at other strategies, or if it, you feel like the market's going to pass you by a little bit before, like Laura was asking, that's when, if you're able to, in her group, they may be able to bring in some revenue while they're looking for capital, But I'm full in the camp of, if you're building something big, get the capital when you're able to get the capital. Make sure you raise enough to get to the next series of milestones that are going to be important in the growth of your company.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Anthony.
You're welcome.
Paulina, I'll just add too, just from my experience, I think that there's a timing piece and a trajectory piece in terms of how your company is going and how it's growing. And you always want to raise money when sort of you're on the upswing, right? And things are going well and you're moving and you're shaking, versus when things have kind of plateaued. So I feel like, in addition to Anthony's comments, there's also a risk in potentially waiting too long, right? And bootstrapping too long, because then the story changes. And again, if depending upon what your ultimate vision is, as Anthony mentioned, do you need to raise or not? That's a separate question. But in terms of, giving up equity now or being in a better place or all that, I totally agree with Anthony. And I also would add that there's a risk of waiting too long and not having sort of as good of a story to tell in terms of your growth.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. I know some folks just joined. Feel free to add your questions to the chat for Anthony. Raise your hand, unmute, and chime in. We're about halfway through our session, so we definitely have some time for a few other questions.
Hi, this is Chang-Mei Tang. We have blood tests that can do cancer screening and a variety of cancer diagnostics. And we want to raise $15 million. Half is for marketing and half is for FDA approval. And we are having a lot of trouble, partly because our marker is so unique that it's in the blood of all cancer patients. They're gigantic cells. And we find in all solid tumors, in all stages cancer. So we are funded by NIH and the Department of Defense for cancer screening. We right now having difficulty to get people to invest us, even though company like Grill raised $1.8 billion in 18 months. And we just tried to raise 15 million. So relatively speaking, we raising very little money. So right now, currently, we switching our business plan to raise revenue rather than try to raise money. And we are working, looking to drug companies, and we are working with some drug companies. And we went to bio and met up about 40, 50 drug companies. So what do you, the question is, how do you get around that people refuse to acknowledge this marker exists? And it's like the mRNA, the woman who developed mRNA assay. And for 25 years, she couldn't get even a research grant. She eventually lost her job and went to work for Benentech. Now everybody's working with mRNA. And we sort of feel like in the same position, and we don't know how to get around that problem.
So two thoughts around that. One, the idea of partnering with people to just at least start to generate some revenue and get some traction in that area, I think can always be helpful, because it does two things. One, it brings in revenue. And number two, it brings in credibility and validation into something the market, for whatever reasons, are not looking at. Another thing is, you know, if you feel like the person who did the mRNA and was in a very similar type of position where people just refused to invest in it or follow it for decades, and then eventually there was this kind of breakthrough moment, and now it's one of the most valuable technologies that people are using across the board in so many different ways. You could look at who backed the company that eventually, you know, there are people, if you think sometimes there are industries that are comparables, where you can look and see if you can find some of the people who were prepared to take a risk on technology that most people were not prepared to take a risk on, and then were very successful in their exits for taking that risk in the space that you're in, approaching that group of people in a similar way and trying to explain why you feel the market is completely missing the value of what you're building, the way the market, a lot of people in the market miss the value on mRNA. But there are a lot of people now who did bet on that piece, although it took a long time and they were a smaller group, who are very well capitalized now. So I think both looking at that group of investors and people who took it, you know, who ultimately took a bet on a technology that most people refused to back, and also looking at the revenue partnerships that you're talking about, are both strong ways to proceed.
Thank you.
So May, have you exhausted all sort of non-diluted grant funding? I know you mentioned some of it from NIH, but have you exhausted other resources?
Definitely not exhausted. And we have 5 research grants, 4 from NIH and 1 from Department of Defense. We also working with drug companies. So we do have revenue, but it's hard to get more, let me say it, to get FDA approval. And so a lot of people we see will say, do you have FDA approval? And we are saying we want to raise money for that. And they say, you're raising too much money. So it's like you want to do exactly what they want, but they don't want to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Do you need the full 15 million for FDA approval?
No, we want to use half of it for marketing. We are setting up a clear lab. Nobody will use our test if nobody in the world knows about it. So we have to market. Marketing do cost money. And
right.
automation.
But perhaps first things first, right? Maybe you raise for FDA approval and then go quickly sort of raise again. Once you have that, then it's a completely different story.
Right. We said anywhere from say 7 million to 15 million. So if we can, we right now have small investors. We need a lead investor. The lead investor doesn't have to put all the rest of the money. They just have willing to be a lead. So
finding a lead is always the challenge. Yeah.
It's the problem right now.
Yeah. Understood. Some of the universities, I know you said NIH, but some of the universities, and I don't know if this was commercialized out of a university or your university or your team, but you know, a lot of the universities now have investor groups as well. And some of the bio and pharma groups have investor groups as well.
The big biopharmas are the ones who doesn't want to look into anything that's new.
Yeah.
The upper management is the one who causes problems. It's not the lower level people. And the lower level people think it's a great idea. When they pitch to the higher level, then it dies.
Right. Understood. A challenging time, I'm sure. Does anybody else have questions for Anthony? We have time for a few more. Some of the folks that have just joined, I don't know if you have questions.
Hi, I'm Dana Wichterman, and I'll ask a question. So I mentor young entrepreneurs in their fundraising, and I'm wondering. I live in the DC metro area, and I'm wondering what are some of the good networking conferences you would recommend going to in these areas? I mean, obviously, I would recommend people coming to your events online, but so anything online or also in person that you would recommend through the year in the DMV area?
I mean, one great one is Connectpreneur.
Yeah, I'll put some in the chat.
With we very supportive of, and Tien and his team have done an amazing job putting that together. But that's kind of a strong leading area platform that has monthly events that look to connect startups and look to connect investors and startups. And then Lisa put in chat 2 other great ones. Lisa, maybe you want to talk just a little bit about both of them.
Yeah, so DC Startup Week is a phenomenal organization, which of course they have the actual week itself, which for this year coming up is September 12th through the 16th, but they also have programming all year round. So it's a great resource. Sign up to receive their alerts. They have workshops and webinars. We do a lot with them throughout the year, but of course the week itself is phenomenal. And then there are lots of startup groups like Startup Grind is just one example. There's Founders Institute, there's 10,000 Cups, there's some female focused ones, there's Street Entrepreneurs in DC, Citrine Angels is an angel investment group, but we also do some events. Seed Spot is a national organization, Halcyon. So there's actually a plethora of startup and networking, groups related to startups in the DMV now. It's incredible. Great places to sign up for, newsletters like DC Inno or DCA Live. Those events are great. Actually, I'll add DCA Live. Those are great. I think they have a Red Hot Companies event coming up in July. Those are always really well attended. So yeah, I would, encourage sign up for our alert for sure. We always not only promote our events, but others that are out there, but, sign up, get on the list and follow some of these organizations on LinkedIn. And there's lots of things going on.
And then also getting into a subsector of like impact or ESG type of things. I believe every entrepreneur makes a good impact if they bring a good product and service to the market. But if you're looking at maybe faith aligned or purpose driven type of founders and investors, are there any of those kind of niche groups that you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. Seed Spot is impact driven, and Halcyon, here I can add that. Seed Spot and Halcyon are both impact driven.
Okay.
Bethesda Green,
right, is impact driven for, climate and all things sustainability.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, we're really, our ecosystem here is really, really grown. And yes, Tara, thank you. Just put in Techstars Startup Day is next week. There's 2 Techstars, I believe, location. The one in DC is called Longevity, and it's focused on the senior community. And then the one in Baltimore is equitable focused, Equitech focused.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I believe we have time for one more. Frederick, did you have a question?
Well, some of the things have been answered, but Anthony, I'm having challenge in attracting hands-on technical software people who have a realistic assessment of what their value is. I talked to one guy who said, I think I want 25% of the company to do 10 hours a week, which I thought was a bit excessive. Our business model is pretty straightforward. I think Lisa has seen it in the past. It's using genetic analysis, genotyping combined with big data analytics to provide personalized guidance for athletes to reduce injury risks.
Wow, very interesting.
I've talked to over 1,000 people worldwide at the user end, gotten incredible validation, but building the prototype requires some software sensitivity and expertise on creating a prototype as opposed to building something that's part of a back end totally.
Yes.
Haven't been successful. Open to your thoughts about how to attract someone who can do it, but also has a reasonable expectation of their value.
Yeah, so I think, it's a very competitive space and there's a lot of people going after that talent. I think you have to look globally and remotely. I think there's a lot of great teams in different parts of the world who are exceptionally talented developers and programmers who we've seen some of the companies we work with tap into for just development of the early stage, and then eventually they'll transition to more of an internal team once they've raised enough capital. But I think if you kind of look beyond, we've definitely seen people have success looking outside of the region. The region is just, there's such an active ecosystem now with so many people looking for the same skills that the market is very challenging to find great developers who have that kind of technical expertise. So if you're unable to do that, there is also, and then there are other groups within the US as well, but I'm saying I think you have to look globally for solutions in addition to just locally if you're having trouble locally.
Good, thank you, appreciate your thought.
Frederick, check TopTal. It's a new, I think it's toptal.com. I just put it in the chat. It's sort of a freelance, but a global freelance marketplace. They're one of our newer partners that are coming on board. To close out the session, Tara, did you have a final question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I was interested in whether you are aware of any angel networks that are local. I know I've been told that many of them are kind of regional based, city based. And so I was just curious for those leading into, a first angel round as a pre-seed startup, which networks could we plug into?
Yeah, well, some of the groups that we mentioned before are also great resources for angel groups and getting connected. Obviously, as a female founder, I would love for you to look at Citrine Angels. We're women investing in women, industry agnostic. Our website is citrineangels.com. There are other angel groups locally. It just depends upon a little bit about what you're doing. There's Halcyon, the group that I mentioned a moment ago, that's social impact driven. They now have an angel group. They also have a fund. Blue Ventures is a long-standing angel group in the area that is more enterprise software based. Lots of newer funds. Early Light Ventures is a new fund. Rare Breed is a newer fund. Connectpreneur also provides access to angel groups and investors. New Dominion Angels, all of some of the universities like University of Maryland has Dingman Angels. So to check your university or any universities of your team, those are always great resources.
Which one did you
Anthony,
say
who
was
else
out
am I
of
missing?
the University of Maryland? I'm actually an alum, so I haven't heard.
Oh, Dingman. Here, I'll put it in the chat. Dingman Angels.
And yes, it's two-sided. There's a B2C side, which is a mobile first app for members of the LGBTQ community. At least that's the initial tranche, where they would be leaving reviews for mental health providers in an effort to promote greater culturally appropriate healthcare for greater outcomes for that community. And then there's a SaaS side that will be plugged in to mental health centers, to vet providers.
Great. So I just added to the chat, Dingman Angels is from University of Maryland. And then if it's LGBTQ focused, Gangels is a phenomenal national angel group.
And then the other one I added that we've worked with in the past is Keiretsu Forum, is a national angel group, but that has regional presence.
Thank you.
Terrific. You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. As a reminder, Founders Q&A last Friday of every month, 11 a.m. I put in the chat, sign up for next alerts is a great way to stay on top of what we're doing, as well as follow us on LinkedIn. So we hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we hope to see you back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Anthony
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
and Lisa.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
folks.